The grand hall of the Galactic Council echoed with laughter. Not the kind, welcoming sort, but the cruel, mocking kind that made Captain James's jaw tighten. He stood straight-backed before the assembled representatives of over 200 spacefaring civilizations, their various forms all united in their amusement at humanity's latest announcement. A seventh-dimensional vessel. The Bright One representative's voice carried clearly through the chamber, its glowing form pulsing with what humans had learned to recognize as content. Humanity barely grasps the concept of six-dimensional travel, and yet you claim to have surpassed even the Bright One's understanding of dimensional physics. More laughter followed. Dr. Diana Wells, standing beside her captain, kept her face carefully neutral. Her hand, however, tightened around the data pad containing 30 years of human research that would soon change everything. "The Infinity Edge is ready for its maiden voyage," Captain James said, his voice steady despite the mockery. "We invite representatives from all Council species to observe the launch next week." A ripple of amused murmurs spread through the chamber. The Bright One's form sparkled with increased intensity, a sign of what humans had learned meant extreme entertainment. "Oh, we wouldn't miss it," the Bright One said. "It's not often we get to witness such ambitious attempts from younger species, though usually they wait until they've mastered basic six-dimensional math before claiming impossible breakthroughs." Dr. Wells stepped forward, her patience wearing thin. "Our calculations are sound. The theory has been tested extensively." "Tested?" interrupted another council member, a tall crystalline being from the Rigel system. "Humans have yet to successfully navigate a simple six-dimensional fold without assistance from more advanced species. Your kind still relies on our guidance for basic interstellar travel." Captain James placed a calming hand on Dr. Wells's shoulder. They had expected this reaction. After all, humanity had kept their true progress secret for precisely this reason. The chamber's automated translation system struggled to keep up with the various sounds of derision coming from all directions. The Bright One drifted closer, its glow dimming to what humans had learned was a patronizing level. "Let us be clear, young ones. Dimensional physics is not something to experiment with recklessly. The jump from fifth to sixth-dimensional travel took the Bright One's 3,000 years of careful study. The seventh dimension. It's beyond even our current understanding." "Perhaps," Captain James replied carefully. "That's because you've been looking at it wrong." This triggered another wave of laughter, even louder than before. Several council members actually left their seats to float or walk closer, as if to better observe these delusional humans. "Wrong." The Bright One's voice carried a dangerous edge now. "We have guided the development of faster-than-light travel for 50,000 of your years. Every species in this chamber learned dimensional travel through our teachings. Every single one." Dr. Wells smiled slightly. "And that's precisely the problem." Before the Bright One could respond, Captain James pulled out his authorization chip. "The demonstration will be held in 7 standard days. Coordinates are being transmitted to all council members now. We look forward to your attendance." As they turned to leave, the chamber erupted in a mix of laughter and shouts. Some demanded they stay and explain their ridiculous claims. Others warned of sanctions against Earth for wasting the council's time. Most just continued to laugh. Back aboard their shuttle, Dr. Wells finally allowed her frustration to show. "They're so certain of their superiority. Did you see how the Bright One practically glowed with contempt? Can you blame them?" Captain James asked, settling into his seat. "For 50,000 years, they've been right about everything. Their understanding of dimensional physics has gone unchallenged. Until now." Dr. Wells activated her data pad, checking the final calculations one more time. "The test runs are all green. The Infinity Edge is ready. When they see what we've achieved, they won't be laughing anymore," Captain James finished. He looked out at the massive space station that housed the Galactic Council. Soon, very soon, that station would witness something unprecedented. Humanity's greatest achievement, born not from following the established paths, but from daring to question them. The shuttle's engines hummed to life, and as they pulled away from the station, both humans shared a knowing look. Let them laugh. In 7 days, everything would change. 3 years earlier, in a modest laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Marcus Reynolds stared at his coffee mug. It wasn't the coffee that held his attention. It was the way the steam rose and split into multiple patterns. That simple observation would change humanity's understanding of the universe forever. "It's like watching probability itself dance," he muttered, his tired eyes reflecting the soft blue light of his holographic displays. The lab, despite its underground location, felt spacious thanks to the advanced equipment lining its walls. Each machine represented humanity's best attempt to copy alien technology, but none of them worked quite right. And now he knew why. "Computer, show me the Bright One's dimensional drive specifications again," he said, taking another sip of his now cold coffee. The holographic display shifted, showing the complex equations that the aliens had generously shared with humanity. "Now overlay my probability matrix." As the new set of equations appeared over the old ones, Dr. Reynolds smiled. The flaw in alien thinking wasn't that they were wrong. It was that they were too right. Too perfect, too certain. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Admiral Stone walked in, his usually stern face showing signs of fatigue. "Please tell me you found something, Marcus. The Council's getting impatient with our slow progress in mastering 6-dimensional travel." Dr. Reynolds gestured at his displays. "Better than that. I found out why we've been struggling with their technology." He pointed to a specific section of the equations. "Look here. The aliens treat dimensions like separate layers, each building on the last. 5th dimension gives us access to probability vectors. 6th dimension lets us manipulate those vectors." The Admiral nodded slowly. "That's basic dimensional theory. Even I know that much. But what if they're thinking about it wrong?" Dr. Reynolds stood up, excitement making him forget his exhaustion. "They treat each dimension like a separate floor in a building. You have to go through each one to reach the next. But what if dimensions are more like water?" He picked up his coffee mug, watched the steam. It doesn't rise in a straight line. It splits, follows multiple paths, exists in multiple states at once. What if dimensions work the same way? Admiral Stone's eyes widened slightly. "You're saying we can skip dimensions?" "Not skip. Blend." Dr. Reynolds pulled up a new simulation. "The aliens are so focused on mastering each dimension separately that they never considered they might work together. Their technology is built on the assumption that you need perfect control of each dimensional layer." The simulation showed a conventional alien ship attempting a dimensional fold. The process was precise, controlled, and incredibly complex. Then, Dr. Reynolds pulled up a second simulation. "This is my theory. Instead of trying to master each dimension separately, we embrace the chaos. Let the dimensions blend naturally." The new simulation showed a ship surrounded by swirling patterns of energy, like the steam from his coffee. By accepting and working with dimensional bleeding instead of fighting it, we can achieve something the aliens never considered possible. Admiral Stone leaned closer to the display. "True 7th dimensional travel." "Exactly." Dr. Reynolds typed rapidly, bringing up more data. "The aliens haven't mastered 7th dimensional travel because they're trying to reach it the wrong way. They want to build up to it step by step. But we can get there by understanding how dimensions naturally interact." "Will it work?" The Admiral's voice was barely a whisper. Dr. Reynolds nodded. "The math checks out. We'll need to build new engines from scratch. Trying to modify alien tech would be pointless. But yes, it will work. And when it does..." He paused, letting the implications sink in. Admiral Stone straightened up, his military bearing returning. "How long?" "With proper funding and support. 3 years to build a working prototype. The theory is solid. We just need to engineer around it." The Admiral nodded sharply. "You'll have everything you need. This stays completely secret. Project designation: Archimedes. He turned to leave, then stopped. The aliens won't like this, Marcus. They're used to being the teachers. Dr. Reynolds looked back at his simulations, at the beautiful dance of dimensional energies that the aliens had never thought to look for. Then maybe it's time they learned something new. As the Admiral left, Dr. Reynolds watched his cold coffee one more time, seeing in its rising steam the future of human space travel. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs came from the simplest observations, and from being willing to question everything you thought you knew. Launch day arrived with a sky full of alien ships. They hung above Earth's atmosphere like jewels, their various designs reflecting sunlight in a dazzling display of technological superiority. Or at least, what they thought was superiority. The Infinity Edge rested in its launch cradle at the heart of humanity's new spaceport, looking deceptively simple compared to the elaborate alien vessels above. Its smooth, dark hull absorbed light instead of reflecting it, making it seem more like a shadow than a ship. Inside the bridge, Captain James performed his final systems check. All stations, report status. Engineering ready. Dr. Wells's voice came through clear on the comm. Dimensional drive is purring like a kitten. Navigation standing by. Lieutenant Reed announced from his station. Course is plotted through all probable vectors. Life support optimal. Another voice chimed in. All systems green. Captain James looked out through the main viewport at the gathering of alien observers. Their small ships had been allowed to dock in a special observation bay, giving them a front-row seat to what they expected would be humanity's greatest embarrassment. The Bright One representative's voice crackled over the general comm channel. Last chance to abort this attempt, humans. We would be willing to overlook this breach of protocol if you admit your error now. Dr. Reynolds, who had insisted on being present for the launch, stood at his station monitoring the dimensional drive readings. They still think we're using modified versions of their technology, he said quietly. They haven't realized we started from scratch. Captain James smiled slightly. Let them think what they want. He opened the comm channel. Thank you for your concern, but we will proceed as planned. The launch countdown began. On the observation deck, alien representatives pressed close to the windows, their recording devices ready to document what they assumed would be a spectacular failure. Some were already drafting statements about human recklessness and the dangers of attempting to rush technological development. T-minus 60 seconds, the automated system announced. Dr. Wells's voice came through from engineering. Dimensional drive initializing. Energy patterns are stable. Looking beautiful down here, Captain. T-minus 30 seconds. The ship's hull began to emit a soft purple glow, nothing like the bright, flashy energy signatures of alien vessels. Where their ships fought against dimensional bleeding, the Infinity Edge embraced it, letting the energies flow naturally through its systems. T-minus 10 seconds. Captain James took a deep breath. All crew, prepare for dimensional transition. This won't feel like anything you've experienced before. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The Infinity Edge didn't shoot forward like alien ships. It didn't tear a hole in space or force its way through dimensions. Instead, it simply shifted. The purple glow intensified for a moment, and reality around the ship began to blur, like watercolors running together in the rain. In the observation bay, the alien representatives fell silent. Their instruments showed readings that shouldn't be possible, multiple dimensional signatures overlapping, blending in ways their science said would cause instant destruction. But the Infinity Edge didn't destroy itself. Instead, it began to exist in multiple states at once, each one perfectly stable. The ship was simultaneously preparing to launch, launching, and having already launched, all happening in the same moment. Dimensional transition complete, Dr. Reynolds announced, his voice tight with excitement. All systems functioning perfectly. We're operating beyond their theoretical limits, Captain. The alien observation bay erupted in chaos. Their instruments couldn't track the Infinity Edge properly because it existed in too many probability states at once. The ship was everywhere and nowhere, its presence spreading through dimensions like ripples in a pond. Captain James opened a channel to all observers, ladies, gentlemen, and representatives of all species. Welcome to the future of space travel. The Bright One's voice came through, no longer mocking but trembling slightly. This is impossible. You can't. The calculations. Actually, Dr. Wells cut in, unable to hide her satisfaction. The calculations are quite simple. Once you stop thinking about dimensions as barriers to be conquered and start seeing them as paths to be danced with. The infinity edge hung in space, its hull now a mesmerizing display of probability shifts, each state visible as a subtle variation in its purple glow. Humanity's greatest achievement had just changed the galaxy's understanding of dimensional travel forever. The infinity edge drifted through space like a ghost, existing in multiple probability states at once. On the bridge, Captain James watched as his crew adjusted to their new reality. Looking at any crew member was strange. They seemed to flutter between slightly different versions of themselves, each one representing a different probability state. "Status report," he ordered, his voice echoing slightly as it traversed multiple dimensional states. Dr. Wells's voice came through the comm, filled with excitement. "Captain, the readings are beyond anything we expected. We're not just traveling through the seventh dimension. We're living in it. Each of us exists in hundreds of probability states simultaneously." Through the main viewport, they could see the alien observation ships trying to maintain formation around them. Their advanced sensors were going haywire, unable to lock onto a ship that existed in multiple states of reality at once. "Show them what we can do," Captain James commanded. "Lieutenant Reed, take us through Pattern Alpha." The young navigator grinned. "Yes, sir. Pattern Alpha beginning now." The infinity edge began to move, but not in any way the aliens had seen before. Instead of traveling through space in a linear fashion, the ship simply existed at its destination while simultaneously remaining at its starting point. Then it was at a dozen points in between, all at once. The alien ships scattered in confusion. Their sensors showed the human vessel being in multiple places simultaneously, each reading as solid and real as the next. "Incoming transmission from the Bright One's vessel," Lieutenant Reed announced. Captain James nodded. "Put them through." The Bright One's glowing form appeared on the main screen, its usual steady illumination now flickering with agitation. "What have you done? This violates every known law of dimensional physics." "No," Dr. Reynolds spoke up from his station. "It only violates your understanding of those laws. We're not breaking physics. We're working with it in ways you never considered." To demonstrate, Captain James ordered another maneuver. The infinity edge phased through a nearby asteroid field, not by avoiding the rocks, but by existing in all possible safe paths through them simultaneously. To the watching aliens, it looked like the ship had split into dozens of copies, each taking a different route, yet all of them were the same single vessel. "Impossible," the Bright One declared. "Your ship should be tearing itself apart. The dimensional stress alone." "There is no stress," Dr. Wells interrupted, her voice calm. "That's what you never understood. By fighting against dimensional bleeding, by trying to force perfectly controlled transitions, you created the very problems you were trying to avoid. We simply let it flow naturally." The infinity edge demonstrated this by shifting into a state where it partially existed in normal space and partially in higher dimensions. The sight made several alien observers disconnect their video feeds. Their minds couldn't process a ship that defied their basic understanding of reality. "Think of it like water," Dr. Reynolds explained, unable to resist teaching even in this moment of triumph. "Your ships try to cut through dimensions like a knife through water. Ours flows with the dimensional currents, becoming part of them." Captain James watched as more alien vessels arrived, drawn by the impossible readings they were detecting. Each new arrival's sensors confirmed what they didn't want to believe. Humans had not only mastered seventh-dimensional travel, they had revolutionized it. "We're detecting multiple power spikes from the alien vessels," Lieutenant Reed reported. "They're scanning us with everything they've got." Let them look, Captain James said with a smile. They won't understand what they're seeing until they change how they think about dimensional travel entirely. The bright one's image flickered on screen. This technology, it cannot be allowed to. Cannot be allowed. Captain James raised an eyebrow. I believe that decision is no longer yours to make. The Infinity Edge isn't just a ship. It's proof that your way isn't the only way. That progress doesn't have to follow your carefully controlled path. As if to emphasize his point, the ship performed another probability shift, briefly existing in every possible position within a 1,000-kilometer sphere. The alien vessel's sensors overloaded, several shutting down completely. The age of the Bright One's technological dominance was over. Humanity had not only caught up, they had leaped far ahead, into a future where the very nature of space travel would never be the same. Lieutenant Reed's hands flew across his control panel as new sensor data poured in. His face, normally calm, showed clear concern. Captain, you need to see this. The main screen shifted to show a massive fleet of Bright One vessels emerging from dimensional space. Unlike the observation ships, these were warships, their sleek forms bristling with weapons that could tear apart small moons. They were waiting, Dr. Wells said quietly. They had a battle fleet ready, just in case. Captain James stood from his command chair, studying the tactical display. Over 300 ships had appeared, arranging themselves in a complex three-dimensional pattern that blocked all conventional escape routes. Their six-dimensional drives hummed with power, creating a web of energy that would trap any normal ship. Incoming transmission from the Bright One flagship, Lieutenant Reed announced. The main screen lit up with the intense glow of the fleet commander, its light so bright that the bridge crew had to squint. This demonstration is over, the alien's voice boomed through the speakers. Your species has shown itself too dangerous to possess such technology. Surrender your vessel and all research data immediately. Dr. Reynolds moved to stand beside Captain James. They're scared, he whispered. For the first time in 50,000 years, someone has surpassed them. Captain James nodded slightly, then addressed the fleet commander. And if we refuse, then we will be forced to destroy your vessel and quarantine your entire system. We cannot allow unstable species to possess technology beyond their understanding. It is our duty to protect the younger races. Dr. Wells's voice came through the internal comm. Captain, I'm detecting power buildups in their weapon systems. They're not bluffing. The bridge crew watched as more alien ships appeared, these belonging to other council races. But instead of joining the Bright One's fleet, they hung back, observing. Their sensors were still running at full power, studying the Infinity Edge's impossible existence across multiple probability states. You know what this is really about, don't you? Captain James addressed the fleet commander. This isn't about protection. It's about control. How many other species have you held back over the millennia? How many discoveries have you suppressed because they didn't fit your understanding of physics? The fleet commander's glow pulsed angrily. We have guided the evolution of space travel for longer than your species has existed. Everything we do is to maintain order and prevent chaos. By forcing everyone to follow your path, Dr. Reynolds spoke up. By making them see dimensions the way you see them. But the universe is bigger than your understanding of it. The tactical display updated, showing weapon locks from multiple Bright One vessels. Their fleet had arranged itself in a perfect containment pattern, perfect for stopping any ship using up to six-dimensional travel. This is your final warning, the fleet commander declared. Surrender now. Captain James sat back in his command chair, looking strangely calm despite the hundreds of weapons aimed at his ship. Dr. Wells, is the dimensional drive still functioning properly? Better than properly, Captain. All probability states are stable. Lieutenant Reed, plot me a course through their fleet. The young navigator looked up from his station. Sir, their formation is perfect. There's no way through without thinking like them. Captain James smiled. Plot me a course through probability space. Show them why their perfect formation means nothing to a seventh-dimensional vessel. The fleet commander's image flickered as its sensors detected power building in the Infinity Edge's drive. What are you doing? Stand down immediately. You know what your greatest mistake was? Captain James asked, his finger hovering over the drive activation control. You thought because you were first, you had to be right. You never considered that a younger species might find a better way. He pressed the control. Let me show you what you've been missing for the past 50,000 years. The Infinity Edge's hull began to glow with that strange purple light again, and reality around the ship started to blur. The perfect trap the Bright Ones had created was about to meet something it was never designed to hold. A ship that could exist in all probabilities at once. The universe seemed to hold its breath as the Infinity Edge's dimensional drive powered up. The ship's purple glow intensified, and then something happened that made even the Bright One's sensors stop working. The human vessel began to exist everywhere at once. Probability field at maximum, Dr. Wells reported from engineering, her voice echoing through multiple dimensional states. We're existing in over 10,000 possible locations simultaneously. The Bright One's perfect formation suddenly meant nothing. How do you trap a ship that exists in every possible position? How do you target something that occupies all probable spaces at the same time? Impossible. The fleet commander's voice boomed through the comm. All ships, open fire. Energy beams and plasma bolts erupted from hundreds of alien weapons. The space around the Infinity Edge lit up like a new sun being born. But as the weapons fire reached the human ship, something extraordinary happened. Every single shot missed. Not impossible, Dr. Reynolds said calmly, watching the sensor readings. We simply exist in all probabilities where their weapons don't hit us. Their attacks can't harm us because we're only solid in the probability states where we're safe. Captain James watched through the viewport as the Bright One's fleet tried desperately to adjust their tactics. Their ships moved in complex patterns, firing from new angles, attempting to predict where the Infinity Edge would be. But they were still thinking in old ways, trying to fight a sixth-dimensional battle against a seventh-dimensional ship. Sir, Lieutenant Reed called out, the other Council species ships are moving away from the Bright One's fleet. Their sensors are still studying us. On the main screen, the fleet commander's glow had dimmed to a pale flicker. This violates all known laws of physics. You cannot exist in multiple probability states without causing a dimensional collapse. Dr. Wells smiled at her readings. Actually, we're preventing dimensional collapse. By spreading our existence across multiple probabilities, we're stabilizing the local space-time better than your rigid dimensional control ever could. To demonstrate, she adjusted the drive's output. The Infinity Edge began to shift through its probability states more quickly, creating a beautiful display of overlapping purple afterimages. Each image was both real and unreal, existing in a state that the alien sixth-dimensional science couldn't begin to understand. Look at your sensor readings, Dr. Reynolds suggested to the watching fleet. Notice how dimensional stress is actually lower around our ship than anywhere else. We're not fighting against reality. We're working with it. More alien weapons fire passed harmlessly through the Infinity Edge's probability field. The ship responded by existing in even more states, spreading its presence across a sphere of space, several light seconds in diameter. To the watching aliens, it looked like a constellation of purple stars had suddenly appeared in space, each point of light being one probable position of the human vessel. Commander, one of the Bright One's ship captains called out, their voice carrying clear panic. Our weapons are depleting power but showing no effect. We can't target something that exists everywhere at once. Captain James stood up from his command chair. This is what happens when you assume your way is the only way. Your weapons are useless against us, not because we're stronger, but because we understand something you never considered, that the universe is built on probabilities, not certainties. The Infinity Edge demonstrated this by suddenly condensing all its probability states into a single point. Directly in the center of the Bright One's fleet, hundreds of alien ships scattered in panic, their perfect formation breaking apart as they tried to escape a vessel that could appear anywhere at any time. "We're detecting power fluctuations across their fleet," Lieutenant Reed reported. "They're burning out their drives trying to maintain sixth-dimensional control in the face of our probability field." Dr. Wells's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Their rigid approach to dimensional physics is actually working against them now. The more they try to enforce their understanding of spacetime, the more energy they waste. The fleet commander's image flickered one last time on the main screen. What are you?" "We're humanity," Captain James replied simply. "And we just changed the rules of space travel forever." 1 month after the confrontation with the Bright One's fleet, the Great Hall of the Galactic Council looked very different. The usual seating arrangement, with the Bright One's representatives in the most prominent positions, had been replaced by a circular pattern where all species sat as equals. Captain James stood at the center of the hall, but this time no one was laughing. The infinity edge hung visible through the hall's massive viewport, its gentle purple glow a reminder of how much had changed. "The vote stands at 198 in favor, 0 against," the council speaker announced, their voice carrying across the silent chamber. "The motion to reorganize the Galactic Council's structure passes unanimously." Dr. Wells, standing beside her captain, smiled slightly. In just 1 month, humanity had reshaped the galaxy's political landscape as dramatically as they had reshaped its understanding of physics. The Bright One representative, its glow now adjusted to a more modest level, floated forward. "For 50,000 years, we guided the development of space travel. We believed we were protecting younger species from the dangers of uncontrolled advancement. We were wrong." "Not wrong," Dr. Reynolds corrected gently from his position near the human delegation. "Just too certain. The universe has more to teach all of us." The new changes were already taking effect. Throughout the hall, representatives from various species were sharing data and ideas freely. The Bright One's strict control over technological advancement had been replaced by open cooperation. "Earth has agreed to share its understanding of seventh-dimensional physics," Captain James announced to the assembly. "But not as the new controllers of this knowledge. Instead, we propose a galaxy-wide research initiative, with all species working together to explore these new possibilities." The hall erupted in appreciative murmurs. Several younger species, who had previously been held back by the Bright One's restrictive policies, were particularly enthusiastic. "Already, we're seeing new applications beyond space travel," Dr. Wells added. "The principles of probability state manipulation could revolutionize everything from medicine to environmental protection. When we stop fighting against the natural flow of dimensions, we open doors we never knew existed." Lieutenant Reed, who had been monitoring the Infinity Edge's systems, spoke up from his communication station. "The first joint research team is ready to begin, sir. We have scientists from 20 different species waiting to study the dimensional drive." The Bright One representative moved closer to Captain James. Its glow had changed to a softer, more natural pattern. "We spent millennia believing we had to control and restrict knowledge to prevent chaos. But your ship, your understanding of probability, it shows a different way. Order through harmony rather than control." Dr. Reynolds nodded. "The universe isn't a ladder to climb, with each dimension being a separate step. It's more like an ocean, with all dimensions flowing together. Once you understand that, you stop trying to control it and learn to swim instead." Through the viewport, more ships were appearing. Vessels from various species, all coming to study and learn. Some were already showing signs of modification, their traditional engines being adapted to work with dimensional currents rather than against them. "The age of secrecy and restriction is over," Captain James declared to the assembly. "Welcome to an era of open discovery, where every species can contribute their unique perspective to our understanding of space and time." The council speaker raised their ceremonial staff. "Let the record show that on this day, the galaxy entered a new age, not through conquest or control, but through understanding and cooperation." As the various representatives began discussing plans for joint research projects, Dr. Wells turned to Captain James. Hard to believe it all started with steam rising from a coffee cup. Captain James smiled, watching the excited interactions between species that had previously been kept separate by artificial barriers. Sometimes the biggest changes come from the simplest observations. All you need is the courage to question what everyone else takes for granted. Outside, the Infinity Edge's gentle purple glow seemed to pulse in agreement, its probability field harmonizing with the natural flow of spacetime, a constant reminder that the universe had more wonders to show them all, if they just learned to look at it in new ways.